Greetings. It is great to have you here, Chris Miller with the National Coalition for Community Capital, and
Brian Beckon,
there we go.
also on the board of National Coalition for Community Capital and a partner at Pathlight Law.
So Brian and I have the distinction of being the two of the original founding board members and the only ones that stuck with it for the whole time. I like to say when we're talking about this space that we were all aligned at the very beginning because we were all passionate around community. But why don't you talk a little bit about the community capital piece specifically? What was it that was so compelling to you and me and ultimately others about this idea of community capital?
Yeah, so community capital is a compelling idea because it is a sort of an alternative to the conventional wisdom. You know, the way things are typically done in America, you know, what we were taught in law school and presumably what they're taught in business school is that if you want to raise if you're a small business, you know, growing your business, you're an entrepreneur, you want to start out and, you know, grow your business. The way to do that is to raise capital from wealth. You know, first you bootstrap until you as long as you can, but then you start raising capital from those wealthy angel investors, and then you move on to attracting capital from wealthy venture capital funds up until you get up to that whatever $1 billion size when you can do an IPO. And the thing about that is what's left out of the equation is regular folks investing. And so in the trajectory of a typical small business that is growing and hopefully becoming profitable, there is no opportunity for regular folks to get in on those investment opportunities because those offerings are all done under private offering strategies that are strictly limited to accredited investors, that is, wealthy people. And the non-wealthy don't have an opportunity to participate. As a result of this being part of our culture for decades now, if you've got enough money to qualify as an accredited investor, you can invest in a lot of really great stuff and you can grow your wealth. But if you're not an accredited investor, if you're not wealthy enough to be accredited, if you don't have $1 million or so in assets, for example, you don't have an opportunity to get in on those investments. And so you know, investing for profit is not available to you. And that's a problem because the law doesn't actually require that it be that way. That's kind of the culture that has developed. And so community capital is an alternative to that says, no, everybody can get in on the game. And that's super important for several reasons. One of which is we want everyone to get in on the investing game because that's how you build wealth. This is fundamental community wealth building. You cannot build wealth without investing. So we need everybody to be investors. And that's an important mind shift because if you're not part of the, you know, sort of the elite investor class, as it were, most people think of themselves as plugging into the economy either as consumers or as workers. In both cases, you're feeding the machine being designed to concentrate wealth in the hands of the investors. So if we're not all investing, we're losing out on the game. So community wealth building is a key part of why I think community capital is really important. But also it's about community control, you know, because who decides where capital goes? Well, it's the investors who decide. And so if a community wants a business or a venture to grow in their community, the community needs to invest in that venture because you don't want to just rely on some far away out of town investor to make a decision about whether that's the right kind of business to have in your community. The community itself needs to have a voice in what gets funded and what happens in their community. So it's about community control, and then also just about community resilience, developing a strong local economy by having money circulate, and so on. So anyway, these are the reasons that I get fired up about community capital. And I could
you're getting fired up right now about it, right?
So I could go on and on for hours.
I can't get a word in edgewise, so that's yeah. No, I love your passion, Brian, and it's been great to live with it. But your expertise in this space has also been really important. But so the idea again behind community capital, and I think now is really a good time for us to say we are interested in everyone in the community. If in an ideal world that NC3 would design, everybody would be investing. That would be part of the routine, normal life. I'm going to invest in my own community, in the businesses, in the real estate, in the projects that happened. And then as the community builds wealth, all of us who are investing in that are building wealth. So we're changing to a collaborative community kind of a model.
Yeah.
And that's really how we intend to move forward. So you also mentioned control, which I think
Yeah.
is really critical. I often talk about the fact that when my wife and I moved into our community in 1999, where we live today, there were about a dozen local banks with headquarters in the community, and there are none left now. So that's a part of this control issue, is that now it's folks outside of our community who are making decisions about what's inside of our community. That's why we have a lot of big box stores and a lot of little box stores, because we're not making that decision. Somebody in some other state who doesn't pay taxes, their kids don't go to school with our kids, they're making those decisions. So that was an important piece of that. So how does that get us from the importance of this to where we are, Brian, right now with this real focus on community investment funds?
Well, so yes, any small business that needs capital can do, say, a crowdfunding raise and raise capital from their own community, perhaps using local, state crowdfunding rules or direct public offerings or something. But uh, those are strategies that require a heavy compliance burden, more or less heavy, not so heavy, but still there's a compliance burden for the entrepreneurs, and most would rather not go through that trouble. What most folks would rather do is go to a local source of capital, and hopefully that source of capital is being funded by local investors, and and sort of tap into a local capital ecosystem. But you mentioned that banks are no longer locally based anymore. So what are the institutions? Well, community investment funds can step in and fill that void. Community investment funds are funds that raise capital locally from within a community and then can invest in the things that the community wants. And they can provide a voice for community investors to have a say in what gets funded from that fund, or what gets capitalized from that fund. So so we think that community investment funds are really the key to scaling up community capital and making it ubiquitous. We'd like to see every community in America have a local community investment fund that serves it. Now, that isn't the case right now. Obviously, we don't have a lot of community investment funds, and so that begs the question: well, why not? Why aren't there more of them right now?
Right.
And the answer to that is, and I don't mean to be putting the words in your mouth to ask the question, but but why aren't they more ubiquitous? And the challenge is that there is a law regulating fund called the Investment Company Act of 1940. It's not it's a securities law that is not as well known as other securities laws, and frankly, most securities lawyers would rather avoid it and just say, well, this can't be done, so let's not go down that road. But the thing is, the Investment Company Act, while it does present a barrier to developing local community investment funds, it has within it a number of strategies that can be used. Now, the problem is these are not well known. They don't teach this stuff in law school. I mean, I took several securities laws classes in law school and practiced securities law in my earlier years for a number of years without ever learning anything about the Investment Company Act of 1940. So it's a relatively obscure law and sounds daunting to most folks. But here's the thing: there really are some good strategies that are available under the Investment Company Act, and yeah, I mean, maybe I could name several. Probably many people know about various charitable loan funds out there, but one that we particularly like, that is a strategy, a compliance strategy that actually gets you out of the Investment Company Act, is this thing we call the Diversified Community Investment Fund. the
Well,
DCIF.
let's talk about that just for a second. But I think we want to also note that it is not just the change in banking which has meant this separation of our ability to make decisions about what happens in our community. We also have this dramatic growth of big box and little box stores and online shopping. And all those cases where the capital that we earn in our communities, it leaves our communities, because if you give it to a big box store or a little box store or to an online store, it leaves your community. And so your ability to control that has changed. So that's why the community investment funds are so important.
Yeah.
And despite what you say is your lack of education around this, Brian has been one of the few people to figure out these kind of workarounds that still comply with the legislation that's out there, but do it. So we got a couple minutes left. Talk about the Diversified Community Investment Fund, what you can do with it. Why are people asking us how to set these up right now?
Well, the idea of the Diversified Community Investment Fund, or DCIF, is really that it's fundamentally a real estate fund. And the idea of a real estate fund is one that is not covered by the Investment Company Act, and so you don't have that heavy regulatory burden because it doesn't primarily invest in securities. Now, a typical real estate fund simply invests in real estate, and it can do a public offering, it can do a private offering, it has a lot of flexibility, and so you can have a true community owned, community financed real estate fund within a community. But the idea of the DCIF is to take that and expand it a little bit, in the sense that a real estate fund can invest up to 40% of its assets in securities. So although
And
it's
again,
maybe
what's the security here? What are we talking about when you say security?
good question. That's not an intuitive thing, is it?
It
So
is not.
when I say securities, I really just mean any investment in a company. If I'm investing in pure real estate, in land, that's not a security. But if I'm investing in a company, that is probably a security, whether that's a note issued by the company, or stock in a corporation, or a membership interest in an LLC, or a limited partnership in a limited partnerships. Um, those are all securities, and so that's what many companies need to thrive. They need equity investors. They need someone who's willing to invest in their securities,
Or
and
loan, right?
it can be a loan, it can be an equity
Right.
investment. But the idea of the DCIF is it has a lot of flexibility to invest in any of those things, and up to 40% of its assets. So a DCIF can have some real estate assets, and you might think of that as the ballast that then allows it to invest in local businesses up to 40% of its assets. And that
Great.
way it has a highly diversified asset base, which helps to moderate risk.
Perfect. So, all right. So I want to do a DCIF, or I'm interested in a community investment fund. What do I do next? How can NC3 help me?
Well, we have some resources on the NC3 website, but thanks for asking, because NC3 also has an accelerator program, and we've have had several now funds, groups that have come to us, NC3, with the idea of developing a DCF, and through a variety of things that we can help them with, they are, one has launched, a couple more are approaching launch, and so this is a great way to get the help you need in developing and launching a DCIF.
So reach out to us, send us an email, give us a call if you have Brian's number, especially, and we'll be happy to help you set up a community investment fund any place in the country. Is that right?
Anywhere in the country. Yep, yep. These are
Fantastic.
federal laws that apply. State laws do vary, but yes, this can be done in any community in America. Yes.
Fantastic. Thanks, Brian. It is always a pleasure.
Thank you, Chris. It's always good to talk with you too.
Bye all.